Hello everyone, this is Sophia Smallstorm, back again with a podcast, and I have a person who's become a favorite now in my short list of podcasts, which I will continue to do because everybody keeps asking me to do more. And this is Dr. Jennifer Daniels. Dr. Daniels did a show a few months ago with me on the subject of dying cells in our body. Dr. Daniels has a very unique mind. This is a person you're not going to come across, a thinker like this, very often, I think, in the history of the world. And we're very, very lucky to have her, and her experiences have put her in a line of thinking and analysis that is very unusual and is greatly needed in this kind of society we're living in, where we turn to professionalism and orthodoxy and degrees and certification and people who are licensed for counsel and to heal us and to tell us what to do with our bodies and our lives. So welcome, Dr. Daniels. It's just wonderful, wonderful to have you back again.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
So today we were going to talk about, would you like to immediately recast the title that people have used before?
I think the title is Murder by Medicine.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think it's important to definitely recast this title. As a doctor, as a licensed, as a person who graduated from medical school, who was board certified, who actually had a license practice medicine for 10 years, I can tell you that what appears to transpire does appear to be murder. In other words, we have people being killed again and again and again by doctors who saw that the last 5 people died. Why are you doing this again? Obviously, you must not be interested in preventing this next death. And so I decided that this is murder. But I was a bit hasty on that. Murder is unauthorized killing. This is an important concept. So if you have the permission of the government to kill, like you're a policeman and you shoot someone in the line of duty, if you are an executioner on death row and you flick the switch, these are not murders. These are authorized killings, authorized to end another human being's life. So murder is when you do not have authorization. And I have to stress that doctors are absolutely authorized to kill. They are licensed. The hospitals are licensed. The insurance companies are licensed. The drugs are licensed. All of these things, these instruments of death and every step of the decision process, nurses are licensed. So all of these individuals have special permission from the government to kill. This means that anyone that they kill in the line of practicing medicine, it is not murder. And so, yes, we can call it killing. Now, another thing I take issue with is this is not death by medicine. It is not death. So let's take a look at what death is. Death is just a state of being dead. Death implies that it just happened. Death doesn't imply deliberate, concerted, premeditated effort on the part either of the individual or the system. And so I think it's important for listeners to understand that when you die as a complication of your therapy, whatever the therapy might be, that death is anticipated, it is expected, and is planned. And so it's important to grasp.
Would you say that the people who've been trained, because all this happens by training, people get their licenses. It's very good that you made that distinction about the fact that this is all licensed and authorized.
Correct.
So these people, when they get their training, is it ever brought to their attention that the training, for the most part, has deleterious consequences over the long haul?
Oh, absolutely. And we are told this is why you need to get training, because the methods that you are using have the ability to kill or to heal. And of course, that's only half true, right? We're told in medicine, all medical students are told that half of everything we tell you is false. Well, the part that's false is that these interventions have the ability to heal. The part that's true is they have the ability to kill. And so we are told this and trained this again and again and again. And so being a competent, capable doctor means that you have the ability to weigh the often imaginary benefit that you've been told the therapy has with the very real harm it has in terms of killing people. And we were even told in medicine, in medical school, that you have to determine in your mind that the benefits outweigh the risk or the harm. And the way we are taught is this. If you administer this therapy to 100 people, it may result in the death of 5 of those. But another 10 that would have died would not die because you administered this therapy. So in other words, you're going to you have a group of 100 people, and without therapy, 10 of them would die. With therapy, only 5 of them would die. But the question is, get this, it's a different 5. In other words, the 5 that die as a result of therapy are not necessarily the same 5 or among the 10 that would have died without the therapy.
That's what I like about you. You can go to an aspect of something that other people are just not going to see. You just zinged out and found another little nugget that's very, very important. So you went to what's considered an excellent medical school, right?
Ivy League, outstanding, top notch.
And when they told you half of what we tell you is false, you're referring to this imaginary benefit thing that they're telling you?
Right. No. They call all the medical students together and said, we got something to tell you. Half of everything we're teaching you is false. They made this announcement.
But why? What does that mean?
Well, let's go through the why first, and then you can go through the what. Those are 2 separate questions. Why is because they knew, I mean, this is in retrospect, so now I'm 30 years out, so I can look back on this. The why is because 100% of what they were telling us was false. And they knew that in the course of just living our lives, we're going to discover things that were not true with pretty good frequency. So if they tell us to expect that half of it's going to be false, then we're not going to question the veracity of the whole until we've crossed that 40% or 50% mark. For example, let's say you're married, you have a spouse, and your spouse lies to you. They lie to you once. It's a fairly substantial lie. Maybe they told you that they earned a certain amount of money and it really was half that. Or maybe they told you they paid the house payment and they didn't. It's a substantial misrepresentation. Okay, so your spouse is going to lie to you once. And what does that go? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Fool me a third time, I must be a fool. So in regular parlance like this, you, me, talking, relating to people, if someone lies to you 3 times, that's kind of like, that's the end of it, right? You're like, okay, fine. I'm not going to be a sucker. I've got to take responsibility that this person is an unreliable source. And if I continue to believe them, then it's my fault and I have to take responsibility for that. I'm really participating in my own deception. Okay. That's the man in the street standard of truth telling and whether a source is reliable. If the source is unreliable 3 times, on 3 occasions, you pretty much dismiss it. Okay, I can't get information from that source. All right. So in medical school, since what they were telling us was 100% lies, they needed to move us into a different standard of truth. So not until more than half of what we are learning is found to be false can we really question the veracity of what's happening here. So the why is they needed us to change our threshold of truth, to change our threshold of reliability and credibility.
Okay, so they have you doing that then. It means that your psyche and mind and your own personal ethics have to shift? Does it include that too?
You can say ethics, but your standard of determining whether someone is deliberately lying to you has to change. So in other words, if you're relating to, let's say you go to a grocery store, they give you the wrong change on 3 occasions. Well, you have to wait a minute, they just don't give correct change, right? But what the medical school is saying, well, we're doing research and our research, our best effort can only prepare for you information that is 50% true. We just don't know which 50% is true. So We're asking you to believe 100% of it for now. And we're asking you then to continue your medical education by vigorously, signing up for these continuing medical education courses and keeping up so we can update you as to what we find over time is not true. And so this is a very elaborate way of saying that we're just telling you a bunch of lies.
Well, I know that people go to medical school because this is a big deal. When you become a doctor, you're a particularly, high-level person in society. You have a pedigree, and you've paid for it, and you've earned it, and all that good stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I guess when you throw this into the mix, people are not going to start digging into the meaning of a statement like that because they're already really, really invested in the future that they're envisioning for themselves.
That's yes and no. Yes and no. I came from a different background than most medical students. So most medical students came from one of two, I'm going to give you extreme examples. They come from a background of extreme economic security, and they're going to medical school to maintain that economic security, or they come from a state of extreme economic insecurity, and they're going to medical school to maintain, to get away from that, to escape that. And so when they get to medical school, they are in a very desperate state of mind because they're putting everything on this. This is their social, cultural, and financial security for the rest of their lives. This is huge. So that's not where I came from. So my background was, I came from an economically extremely secure background. I never heard the words, we can't afford it. Never heard that. I had to leave home to find out there was such a thing. But I grew up in the ghetto, surrounded really by other middle-class blacks, and we were all in the ghetto. This was before segregation was supposedly relieved. And if you left the ghetto, the police would literally apprehend you and bring you back. This is the United States, right? So I lived in the ghetto, and I looked all around me in the ghetto. And even though our income was about 5 times the national average income, we lived in the ghetto. But I could see, by looking all around the ghetto, that one could live fine in the ghetto on really a fraction of what we earned. And actually, I was reminded of this every day by my mother. Because your father throws away money, we're living here. We could be living in, some big house on the hill, whatever. And I was like, hey, Mom, chill. It's okay. I'm having a great time here. It's no problem. So I had incredible security, not only financially in terms of my background, but I had extreme security and understanding that I didn't need that much money to live. I could live on a fraction of, what my parents earned. So when I went to medical school, I went there because I thought I was going to learn how to help people get better and be able to do something for my fellow human beings that would be extremely valuable. So when I heard this announcement that half of everything we're teaching you is false, I'm like, are you guys serious? I called home. I said, Mom, they teach us a bunch of lies. My mother was upset. Not at what they were teaching me, but that I would call her with this harsh judgment. It's like, no, I don't accept 50% lies from anybody. Not from my bank, not from, my friends, not from my family, not from the grocer. I don't accept 50% lies from anybody. It's unacceptable. And so I said, Mom, they're teaching us a bunch of lies. And do you know what my mother said to me?
What?
This is my mother, the pillar of virtue. Tell the truth always. Be honest. Don't associate with dishonest people. She says, Jennifer, I think you're reading too much into this.
Well,
let me give you the English translation. Roll over and accept the lies.
Well, she wanted you to be a doctor too, obviously.
Exactly. But she had her own motivation. So her motivation, and I'm guessing on this, all right, because I'm not a mind reader, but her motivation was she'd have a daughter who's a doctor. I would be financially secure. I would be able to care for her in her old age. It's this whole big picture in her mind of extreme security. If when, if you weren't even into the if, because we're in the when now, because I'm in medical school, this is when you will be a doctor. So, and that's the problem that medical students face, is when they determine that this is wrong, they lose all support. You know, I called my mother, who had raised me to be an honest person, to pay my bills, to keep my word, and don't accept anything less from anyone else, right? And I tell her I'm getting half of what they're teaching me is lies, and they're a bunch of liars. It's a fraud. You can't be any more accurate than 50%. Knowingly, and knowingly they know that they're 50% wrong, then this is not any place to learn anything. How can you heal it? Listen, I'm giving you directions. I'm going to tell you, go 1 mile, turn left, go a quarter mile, turn right, continue over the bridge, and then take a left before the grocery store, right? What if half of all the directions I gave you were false? There would be no way. Your chance of getting to the correct destination is absolutely 0%. 0%.
Well, you'd have to find it on your own.
Following those directions, you would never get there. Following those directions, you would never get there. Which means following the directions, following the instructions, what a doctor learns in medical school, his chances of making a diagnosis that are beneficial to you are 0. 0. That's his accuracy rate. That's his batting rate. 0. His chances of recommending a therapy that's actually going to help you is just about 0.
So when did you realize this in your practice?
Well, first of all, obviously off the bat, in medical school, when they announced that half of everything we were being taught was false. So then my next question was, am I obligated to follow these rules that they're setting out? And they told us, no, you have something called medical judgment. So because I attended an Ivy League school, I was told that I was one of the doctors that could exercise medical judgment and decide not to follow something that I knew to be false. And so when they told me that, I said, okay, fine. I can deal with that. I can go forward, finish these 4 years, and graduate and do what I find makes sense.
So wait a minute. The doctors who don't go to Ivy League medical schools can't make such a decision?
They're told that they cannot, correct, right? It's a different education, a very different education that doctors get at Ivy League schools compared to non-Ivy League schools. We'll call it a state school.
So would this Stanford is not an Ivy League school.
No, Stanford is one of them. So I would say Stanford, Yale, Harvard, UPenn, I believe Brown, Johns Hopkins. Those are a few of them. There's about 10 or 15 of them. But when I talk to doctors from other medical schools, we'll call them lesser medical schools, what they share with me is that they are not allowed to deviate from the standard of care. There is no deviation from the standard of care. Whereas the Ivy Leaguers are trained that we have some involvement, not a lot, some involvement, if we do research, in making the rules or shaping the standard of care. What we are not told is all the research is paid for by drug companies or government. And therefore, our conclusions are dictated by that. And so we are only really allowed to put our rubber stamp on a standard of care that is determined by hospital administration, insurance administration, or government or drug companies.
So you're really making a distinction between the elite schools and the non-elite schools, and that has to do with who is interested in keeping the elite schools going for the sake of, dictating this standard and creating this standard. So there's like a club.
A club, you can say it, a hierarchy. And as a result of this, basically, the public is led to believe that a high status school, let's say Harvard, Yale, whatever, that these schools have critical thinkers that are interested in the truth and ferret out the truth for the rest of us, especially things that maybe we can't understand, or they have access to data that we don't have, something along those lines. But actually what it means really is that their staff reliably produces the results that the people in charge want.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. It really does. So you went on to practice as a doctor back in the ghetto, right?
Yep, because I was happy as a clam in the ghetto. I was happy. It's like, well, why should I leave?
And you wanted to do good there. You wanted to help the people that you had grown up with. I think that's what you've said on other shows, too.
Yes, but even more specifically, when I left the ghetto, let's say I went to Harvard, UPenn, the environment was so incredibly hostile. It was unbelievably hostile. I said, you know what? I don't have to put up with that. I want to work around people who are going to be nice to me and people who like me. I'm going to go back to my ghetto where everybody was nice and kind to me.
Yep, that's a good
decision. So I didn't
see
the ghetto as a downtrodden place that needed to be uplifted because, again, our family income level was pretty darn high. And my neighbors, next door was a nurse's aide, married to a machinist, and down the street was a porter, someone who carried luggage for the airlines. Now, not a high status job, but apparently tips were.
Okay, so you're in a middle class in the ghetto.
Yeah,
but
middle class, upper middle.
You're calling it the ghetto, so on some level it had to be impoverished. There were people there who didn't make a lot of money, and they were underserved, and this is another reason why you relocated.
No, I was not interested. I had no interest, whatever. People who are underserved for a reason. And so I had a policy in my office. Look, these are the prices. You know what the prices are. If you want to pay, fine. If you don't want to pay, go someplace where you don't have to pay. Why was that? Because I actually had serious bills to pay, and I didn't have any government subsidies. And so, but people who were poor, who were on welfare, literally borrowed money from their relatives to pay to come to my office. And they were treated with the same dignity, respect, and care as any other person.
So what I was actually getting at was these communities don't always have great doctors practicing right there.
Oh, my community had no doctor. There was no doctor for miles. No doctor.
Okay, so in that regard, you were serving in an area that you felt loyal to. And so once you were there, you practiced medicine with the medical judgment that you were allowed to.
Exactly. I exercised a lot of it. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. That didn't work out. That drug's not working. I'm not using that drug anymore. And I literally started just crossing them off the list, just crossing them off. And so by the time the government caught up with me, I wasn't using any drugs at all.
So tell us that story.
So I show up back in my ghetto, and I decide I'm going to start this medical practice. And of course, this is news. This is big news because everyone presumes the reason there's no medical doctor there is because the people can't afford medical care. Well, I knew better because I grew up there, and everyone had jobs. It's just that we were all had dark skin and lived in the same place. And I won't say everyone had jobs, but most people had jobs. And so I calculated that with the population and with the income, that literally there were 25,000 people that could afford at least one visit a year. And at that time, the visit was $50. And so with that kind of support, I could easily, make a very good living. So I show up, I buy a city block, and I build a medical office building on it. Well, this was big news because everyone knew that I was going to have experienced financial ruin very quickly. But I'd gone to business school, and I learned there that insurance companies are not interested in paying doctors. So I didn't count on insurance companies doing anything for me. But meanwhile, 2 years before I came back to Syracuse, I had a personal health crisis. I got pregnant, and I got terrible abdominal pain, and I just, it was like I thought I was going to die, certainly lose the baby. I didn't go to the hospital because I'd been to medical school, and I knew that there was nothing hospitals could do about this, so there's no point in going. And so I did decide to become vegetarian, though, and in 24 hours, I was perfectly fine. And so I continued to be vegetarian, had a wonderful pregnancy, easy birth, healthy baby. And so I come back to Syracuse, and I prescribe drugs like I'm taught according to standard of care, and people are just not getting better. And so I said, I started recommending people eat a vegetable, they drink water, have more bowel movements. And at the same time, the vegetarian magazines all have a back section full of ads and health books. So I started buying those health books and reading them and trying things out. And so over time, I developed herbal replacements for pretty much every single drug that I, as a primary care doctor, was trained to prescribe. And this, for me, really crystallized that what was going on was that we were not given 50% false information in medical school. We were being given 100% false information in medical school. That's number one. Number two, there's no way they could not have known that information was false. They had to know, because if I was able to run through this information, sort through it pretty quick, and at the end of, say, a 4-year period, determine that 0 of the drugs I'd been trained to prescribe were useful, it seems to me that an inquisitive individual in medical school could have figured out the same. So what's happening then is doctors are being deliberately misinformed, and they're being coerced to administer therapies that are not only ineffective, but very damaging, in fact, deadly. And in medical school, we were told, you're being trained to prescribe drugs that are deadly, drugs that have killed people. However, you have special permission to do this because you have special knowledge on how to use these deadly drugs in a safe and effective way.
So this is where the lethal dose thing comes in, which maybe you can explain to the audience, right?
So doctors are trained, we are trained and conditioned to prescribe drugs that are lethal when prescribed in the therapeutic range. So this is important to get a grip on, is that if a doctor prescribes, let's say, a blood pressure drug in the range as dictated by the package insert, according to the criteria used in the package insert, there will be deaths from that drug. And we are told, as doctors, this is why it requires special training and a prescription to use these drugs. This is why these drugs cannot be over the counter, because it requires special training. And so we're like, okay. And so even if you prescribe this drug as you are supposed to, you will kill a certain number of people. However, the number of lives saved will be far greater. And when we were taught in medical school about the lethal dose, there's LD, which stands for lethal dose, and then a number. And that number is the percent of people who die when given that dose. So there's the LD 100, right? The dose at which, if you give this dose to people, 100% of the people who receive this dose will die. And then there's the LD 50. That's the dose at which half of all who receive that dose will die. And then you go down to LD 10. So, of course, I raised my hand in medical school and said, well, what about the LD 0? And the instructor had this scornful look on his face. There's no such thing. I said, oh. And so the safety of a drug is measured by the ratio between that drug and the LD 50. So let's say, the LD 50 in that drug. So the denominator is your drug. So if the LD 50, let's say, is 100 milligrams, and let's say the therapeutic dose is 10 milligrams, then that's a ratio of 10. So the ratio between the LD 50 and the recommended therapeutic dose is 10. That's nice, but that doesn't tell you how many people die at the 10 milligram dose, does it? So it's a spurious measure of safety. It's a measure of safety that makes the doctor feel more comfortable prescribing it, but doesn't really tell him how safe the dose is. In other words, this 10 milligrams, what is that? Is that the LD 10? Is it the LD 1, where 1% of those who take it die? What percent die at the therapeutic dose? And that information is usually not given to the doctor. Now, if you look at some package inserts, shockingly, that will actually appear. they will say, at the therapeutic dose, 1 person in 10,000 will die. At the therapeutic dose, 1 person in 1,000 will die. And so package inserts actually do give this information, not always, but sometimes. And so here you are, a doctor in private practice. And so you have to say to yourself, if I'm going to prescribe drugs that are this deadly, how much deadliness am I okay with, and how many patients do I want to kill a year? So let's say average doctor, let's say primary care. You might see 5,000 different individuals a year. That's a high number, but let's just use that number. So if you're going to prescribe for 5,000 people and you're using a drug that kills 1 in 1,000, then you can expect 5 deaths that year among the people that you're caring for. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. But isn't part of the prescriptive ability you decide how much the dose is per patient?
No. What happens is, let's say you have a blood pressure drug and 10 milligrams is the starting dose, and you can go up to 100 milligrams. If your dosing in your chart is not between 10 and 100 milligrams, you got troubles. And now with electronic health records, this is being monitored even more closely. So a doctor who decides that a patient needs to start at 2.5 milligrams is definitely out of line. That doctor is not adhering to the standard of care and is incompetent.
But between the 10 and 100, that's where you have the decision-making ability.
Yes.
And so you are fiddling around with the lethal dose in that range, aren't you?
Absolutely.
But that number isn't known to you.
Not usually. If I take the time to read the 7-point type in the PDR and the fine print, sometimes I can find that number. Like I said, when I have found it, it's somewhere between 1 in 1,000 and 1 in 10,000, which are pretty high death numbers because, again, you're talking about killing 5 people a year if you have a 5,000 person practice.
And then there are all the other drugs that you administer. So you have to add those in, too, to the total.
Right.
And that's the death rate in the practice, right? That's what that's called.
Correct. And what I like to say is that every doctor is really a serial killer because every doctor kills the patients one at a time, again and again and again. Kills one patient, then kills another, then another, then another. So we have a serial killer. Now, if you have someone, we've had a lot of famous serial killers in the United States, but if a serial killer is killing, say, 5 people a year over a 20-year period, that's 100 killings.
That's awful. I'm sitting here frowning and shaking my head through this whole interview so far.
Yeah, but this is the kind of information that doctors are given. Most doctors, again, if you sleep deprive somebody 90 hours a week, they're working, they don't have time to sit down and do these calculations, let alone read the 7-point type in every package insert. When I was training as a resident and I was working at 120 hours a week, when I had spare time between patients, I was exhausted. I would literally, wearing my scrubs, I would sink down to the ground and against a wall and unroll this. It's almost like toilet paper. And you unroll this long thing. It's like 2 feet long, 1.5 inches wide, small 7-type print. And I would literally just start reading it for any drug that I had prescribed. And I'd have a pocket full of package inserts and I'd read them one after the other. So one day, a senior doctor caught me reading these. He looked at me. He said, "You really read those things?" I said, "Yeah." And he shook his head.
Well, you're different.
Reinforcement.
You were just born different. You had to have been. Just everything that you did, nobody else bothered to do. And they just went along with the crowd and looked forward to the benefits of gaining the status and the license and having the practice. And you were much more diligent about what was going to go into your practice, right?
Right. So I look at this is my practice and I'm going to get this right. I'm going to get this right. And so I'd read these package inserts after you read the whole thing. I mean, the whole thing, because there's a big temptation to skip over certain parts just because you're busy. The type is so small. You've got things to do. But if you read the whole thing, the whole package insert, the probability of you prescribing that drug greatly plummets.
So they are actually disclosing by putting that insert in there, even though it's in very small type and there's a disincentive for busy people to read it. And the doctor is not getting the disclosure because he or she is too lazy to do the work, to learn what is...
Well, I don't know about lazy. I mean, I would say, honestly, as I just communicated to you, the doctor is actually discouraged from doing that. So here I am reading this package insert, and this doctor is ridiculing me and showing his disapproval. So doctors are actively discouraged from reading it. Doctors are trained. How are we trained? We're trained by watching another doctor, seeing what he does, and we do the same thing. And so we are actively discouraged by just the method of our training from reading these things. They cram our time full of useless, trivial, meaningless, menial activities for 130 hours a week, deprive us of sleep. And so the last thing that we can do is reach for these package inserts, and they're even like tissue paper. You darn near see the print on the other side through the front side as you're reading it. This is not in any way conducive to being read.
What are some of the useless, trivial, meaningless activities that you do for 130 hours a week?
Staying awake in the maternity unit, doing physical exams on whoever might come in.
Why is that useless and meaningless?
Well, because you're staying awake waiting. It's the waiting that's useless.
Okay.
And then what's also useless is a lady coming in labor doing a physical exam on her. It's ridiculous. It's like doing a physical exam on someone before they have a bowel movement. This person is going to expel this baby no matter what. You know what I mean? You don't need to. All this history physical exam stuff is just a ritual. Drawing the blood in this lady, again, it's a ritual. In 99% of all the cases, the blood is never needed. The urine is never needed. The physical exam is never referred to.
But then isn't it some kind of a pretense at thoroughness?
Yes, the word is pretense.
Yeah. So they do this in order to cover their butts, but what they're really doing is expending somebody's energy, yours, on something that isn't going to matter, and the activity that does matter is not getting attended to.
Deliberately so, right. So in other words, if I, as a resident training in obstetrics, didn't have to do all this trivial stuff, I would have more than enough time to read every package insert for every instrument and for every drug before it was prescribed. So
in your practice, you're learning. When you say, I developed herbal go-tos for...
Right.
Yeah, so you started to offer your patients alternatives.
Yeah, because I just didn't want to see them suffering anymore.
And what happened?
They got better. People actually got better, and they got better quickly, like in hours. And people didn't have to be hospitalized. And the death rate went from 4 people a year down to 0.
So I think, if I remember one of your other interviews that I listened to, you made it a practice to offer people 3 choices.
Yep, at least.
And what were those?
Do nothing, standard of care, or natural stuff. And I even gave them a 4th choice. They could combine the 2. So depending on how much they were willing to do in terms of changing their lifestyle, I could say, okay, fine. I told you to do 100%. You're willing to do 30%. We can make up the difference with 1 drug instead of 2.
So standard of care refers to what you were taught to tell them to do, the allopathic method. So you said to them, you can do nothing, You can do this stuff that I was told to tell you to do, or you can do this other method, which is a natural form of
well, even
healing.
more precisely, you can do this natural stuff, which I have found to be effective. You can do what I was taught in medical school, which I have found to not be effective, or you can do nothing, which is actually in between the two.
And so how many people did nothing, just out of curiosity?
Not very many. Not very many. I was shocked. Because if someone told me that, I would just go home and do nothing. I would be like, oh, thanks. Okay, one less thing to worry about. But not very many people took the do nothing. Most people took, initially, either the standard of care or combining standard of care with the alternative. And the way I would combine them is someone says, well, I don't know, I don't want to just do the natural stuff. I want to be able to fall back on the standard drugs. I said, okay, here's the deal. Here's what I think you should do naturally. Do this, give it 3 days. If it doesn't work, here's the drugs, get the prescription filled. And what I later found out is my prescription fill rate was just about zero.
And that's when the drug reps started to call you and say, why aren't you buying our drugs?
Right. No, they didn't call. They made a physical visit and threatened me. If they had just called, it wouldn't be so bad. I don't mind being threatened by phone. I can always hang up. But when someone shows up physically and threatens you, it's like, whoa, we've crossed a line here.
What did they threaten you with?
Oh, no, it's just belligerence, yelling, demanding, intimidation.
And then the hospital would ask you why you weren't hospitalizing people or sending for x-rays.
That was a phone call. And then what they did was they downgraded my privileges from regular to courtesy. So if you don't admit enough patients, they downgrade your privileges. And this is an incentive for doctors then to admit people who don't need to be admitted just to keep their admission numbers up.
It's really awful. I mean, I didn't realize that about the privileges. I thought that if you practiced in a certain area, you had access to a couple of hospitals in that area, and that was that.
No. So if you are, and I had privileges at, at least 2 hospitals. And they are privileges, which means they can be taken away for any reason and for no reason. Your right to use the hospital. And then patients are conditioned erroneously to think of a doctor who hospitalizes more patients as being the more effective, safer, and more desirable doctor, which is actually just the opposite. If this doctor has a lot of his patients going to the hospital, then he is really messing up. And he is either destabilizing them so they need hospitalization, or he's failing to stabilize them so they don't need hospitalization. And so patients are conditioned then to take the big markers for danger and accept them, interpret them as meaning a doctor is more capable.
So after you changed the death rate in your practice and were visited and received these phone calls, what happened next?
Well, I was involved in a lot of other areas. I had a very holistic view towards health. So I was located in the ghetto. There were a lot of shootings and killings, drug-related. And so I had gotten involved in getting drug dens demolished. And so as a fallout of getting them demolished, the death rate, the murder rate in my neighborhood went from 18 a year to 0. So the killings didn't happen because the drug dens weren't there. And then, I got roads paved, and I started a scholarship fund and gave a scholarship to kids who wanted to go to college. So I was doing a lot of stuff. And so one thing came to my attention, that there was this $30 million bond issue where lawmakers were going to take $30 million, hand it to private citizens, and have taxpayers repay $45 million over a 15-year period. And I said, boy, that sounds like a pretty raw deal to me. And, of course, it was supposed to be education, school-related, and the buildings being renovated by these private individuals were buildings that the children would never be allowed to occupy or even enter. So I said, well, this has got to stop. And so I was looking for reasons to end this deal. So I thought just sending a simple letter to the lawmakers, letting them know, hey, this is like a really bad idea. Why don't you guys vote against it? I did that, and I got a few letters back saying, hey, mind your own business. You're just a doctor. What do you know about bonds? You probably can't even add. And I said, well, wait a minute. I got a degree from Wharton. I know something about this stuff. And so I just hit a total brick wall on that. And I decided to keep pushing. And so what I did was I investigated further and found out that the $30 million loan had no collateral. It was being given to a paper shell corporation, and that it was essentially a bank robbery. When you go to a bank and say, I want $30 million and I have no collateral, that's basically theft. And so I let the lawmakers know this, and they said, no, we're going to do this anyway. I let the bank know this, and the bank said, whoa, wait a minute, back up, there's a problem. And the bank refused to make the $30 million loan, which means the taxpayers could not be committed to repaying it, and the private citizens didn't get the $30 million. However, I did not know they had already bribed the governor to make this happen. And so the governor was not going to pay back the bribe money, but he did drop a dime and call the licensing board. So this doctor does not need a medical license. And he must have been pretty upset, and I'm sure they had a meeting. Somebody somewhere had a meeting, and they said, well, why don't we just make this real quick and just pay someone to kill her? And the bank apparently was also at the table and said, no, that's not on this. You do whatever you want to her, but don't kill her. And I said, okay, fine. So they took my license away, put me on 2 do not employ lists and the terrorist list.
Well, it really speaks to what their intentions are, I mean, everything that you could accomplish, given what you were already doing with the medical practice, all the stuff you described in addition to that, that's right. That's what we want in the world. That's what
you want in the world.
Well, on behalf of humanity. But I guess the people in power don't want those things because they don't benefit themselves to the exclusion of everyone else benefiting. And that's what they want. Right. They want to benefit to the exclusion of everybody else benefiting. So you don't fit, I don't fit. Your healing methods don't fit. And the questions you asked in school don't fit. Now, can you tell me why you also went to Wharton at the same, because it was at the same time as going
concurrently,
to
right? Concurrently. So I squeezed both degrees into 4 years instead of 6.
And why did you just decided because Wharton was across the street, you might as well go and get an economics degree also?
Oh, no. Other way around. So here I was at Harvard, and I figured out that I was going back to the ghetto to practice medicine. And I believed the propaganda that it would be difficult to collect money in the ghetto. That's difficult. So I said, I got to get a business school degree to sort out how I'm going to make sure that this medical practice is financially sound. And so I was actually looking for medical schools that had a business school across the street so that I could do both degrees in 4 years because I was in a hurry. I wasn't interested in making a career out of education. I just need to know how to, given the realities of the ghetto, if you want to call it that, how was I going to collect money? How was I going to pay my bills? That's what I needed to know. And it turns out that because the medical school was literally across the street from the business school, it was a 5-minute commute from one class to the next, and I ran pretty quick. Whereas if I had gone to Harvard, the Harvard Business School is like 2 hours away from the Harvard Medical School. So that's literally 2 more classes that I would be able to take, or would not be able to take just because of the commute. So by going to a place that had the 2 together, I was able to do that. So my reason for going to business school was very specific. I want to know what were the financial sources of income for my medical practice, and how could I access those to make sure I paid my bills. And so after intense study, and I even would go after class and talk to my professors. And I actually met with a few of them and said, hey, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going back to the ghetto, starting a medical practice, and this is what I want to do. I want to make sure that, things balance out, that I have enough money to pay my bills. What can I take away from your course that's going to help me sort this out? And, these guys are just like, oh, my God, you have really set a difficult task for yourself. But the nice thing about Wharton is all the professors were accessible. I could ask all of them this question, and they all gave me their best answer. But what I took away from the Wharton experience was you absolutely cannot rely on the insurance companies. The insurance companies are there to get money out of the patient and make sure the doctor gets none of it. And that alone was, as I say, worth the price of admission, because I didn't fall into the $10,000, $50,000, $20,000 trap many doctors starting out do. Many doctors starting out sign up for all the insurances they can apply for. Oh, sign up for all these insurances. And then what they do is the insurance company plays this big shell game. And the insurance company gets like 6 months behind in paying you, and then decides not to pay you at all. And so you've been working 6 months for free, but you didn't know it. So you've been paying your staff, you've been paying licensing fees, insurances, and borrowing money to do this because you believed the insurance company was going to pay you, and of course they don't. And this is what causes a lot of doctors, solo practice doctors, to close their practice and go work for somebody, usually the insurance company, actually. So since I knew this, I knew that at the end of the day, the only source or the most reliable source of money was the patients. And so I said, well, if that's the case, all I have to do is focus on getting them better and what is it they're trying to accomplish and help them accomplish what they're trying to accomplish and ask them for money. That's it. And doing things that way, I made more money as a primary care doctor in Syracuse, New York than the average surgeon in Syracuse, New York made, even though my practice was located in the ghetto.
So why would the insurance company decline payment after 6 months, after all, because the service doesn't qualify for coverage or some such thing?
You mean, what excuse do they give the doctor? Oh, at the end of 6 months, once they've got you 6 months behind in payments, where they've gotten 6 months of free work from you, their attitude is, yeah, hey, go fish. You want the money? Sue me. Try and get it. See how it works. And so then the doctor's got to dig into his pocket for another, 10 to 20,000 to pay lawyers. And then it takes time away from his practice, so he earns even less money. And so most doctors pretty quickly write that off, because if they leave that alone, just forget it and go forward, then they can make more money. But because I'd gone to business school, I knew that that was the end game, and so I just didn't get involved.
So if they are signed up for all these insurance companies, and that's the channel through which they make money, but those companies don't pay them, then how do they move forward and make more money?
It's a game of duck, duck, goose. So let's say you're a doctor and you take 10 insurances. Then what you do is over time, some insurances pay you better than others. You pump your fees up. You charge $10,000 instead of $1,000 because if you charge 10, you're going to get 5,000 from some sources, 0 from others, and so it's an average game. And so this is another thing that's responsible for extreme price inflation in medical care. So if you didn't have insurance companies that were basically scamming the doctors like this, then, and the hospitals, they scam everybody pretty much, then fees would be at least half of what they are now. Probably even, I would say, maybe even 25%. So having the insurance company in the game, the doctor now is going to sustain 60% of what he does. He's not going to get paid for. He just doesn't know which 60%. So what has he got to do? He's got to triple his fees on what he is going to get paid for. So he triples his fees to now 300% of what they would be. And at the end of the day, he's going to collect 30%, and he'll have enough to pay his bills and buy some groceries. That's one piece of inflation. So one level of inflation is the doctor actually not getting paid. The second level of inflation is the doctor literally has to hire anywhere from 1 to 3 individuals per doctor in order to communicate with the insurance companies in order to get paid. So now you have the doctor's overhead literally doubling. So let's calculate this then. So doctor's overhead would be, let's say, 100 units. Because he takes insurance, his overhead becomes 200 units. But because he takes insurance, he's only going to get paid a third of what he asked for. So now he has to ask for 600 units in order to get 100 units.
It's incredible. I mean, it doesn't work. It's useless. It's a useless
It works very well.
game.
It works very, very well. What does it do? The doctor who doesn't do this little calculation here, and most doctors don't do this calculation until it's too late, it creates these solo practice doctors go out of business predictably, and they go work for the insurance company at the HMO. And what does the insurance company pay them? Less than the 100 units. But the doctor's happy to have that because at the end of the day, he's going to collect maybe 100 units if he's lucky to cover his business expenses, plus maybe 10 units, which means you got some groceries but not the rent. So this is what doctors in solo practice are up against. So what do? They go work for a hospital, they go work for a drug company, they go work for an insurance company, or they go work for the government. That's pretty much the size of it. There's some private enterprises, but not very many. And so what this has done then, it has taken a transaction where the patient gives the doctor money. Let's say the patient, we'll just take it back to 1975. Average doctor's office visit was what? $20, right? Back then. And that's what you would pay the doctor. And the doctor would get the $20, and the doctor would spend the $20 on his family, because who was the doctor's receptionist? It was his wife, of course. And that was it. That was the whole office staff. And where was the office? Well, it was in a room in their house, maybe the garage or something. This is the state of office practice in 1975. And it pretty much was like this up until as recently as 1990. So what happens then, so this doctor he's got no extra property tax payment. He has no extra office rent to pay. He has no employees to pay. He's paying his wife something, but it's all going into the general kitty, right? And he does no expense of communicating with the insurance company, maintaining medical records, all this communication. Back then, doctors kept their medical records on a 5x7 card. I kid you not. I met these doctors. I looked at their cards. And so now, fast forward, is 2016. What does the patient pay? $20. That's your copay deductible, right? It's your copay, $20.
Right.
And that's what the doctor gets. And all the other money the doctor gets goes towards so-called expenses. Where who does he hire? Now he's got to hire an MBA to run the friggin' office. And it's just what the MBAs and insurance people plan. As they have fleeced the doctor, they've increased what the patient is now paying at $20 out of pocket, and he's paying $500 to $5,000 a month in insurance premiums, none of which the doctor sees. It all goes to administrative costs, more or less. In other words, if you go through this whole rigmarole here. And so the other thing that happens, because the doctor's got to charge 6 times the fees in order to get paid $1, he's got to charge 6. The person showing up without insurance, they have to pay $6. Meanwhile, the insurance is stiffing them and at best paying $2. And so now people mistakenly get insurance thinking that the insurance company is paying their bills when that's not what's happening. The insurance company is really stiffing the doctor.
Well, you're saying it works because it's a very lucrative game for the corporation, the insurance company.
Yes. The people who design the game, they're making the rules. They design the game.
But doctors end up participating in the game. Why aren't they smart enough to figure this out?
Because they're conditioned in medical school. They're in a state of sleep deprivation and desperation, as I described before. And they are conditioned to believe what they're taught in medical school, which is, as we discussed, 100% false, not 50% false. And now, in medical school, the insurance companies are actually controlling the curriculum, where doctors in medical school are being trained as to how they should qualify for different insurances.
As to how they should qualify for different insurances, did you say?
Yes, you have to fill out paperwork to get accepted by the insurance company in order for them to process claims. And so doctors are being told, you have to fill out this paperwork for this company and that paperwork for that company. And even when I was in medical school, I was told, your patients cannot afford your fees. They cannot afford your fees. This is why you must take insurance.
Again, it just seems hopeless. It seems
but
hopeless.
I knew better. I knew better because I ran a business selling books door to door, and I earned enough money to pay for me to go to Harvard. So I knew people had money because I knocked on their doors and asked for it, and I got it. So you couldn't tell me that my patients can't afford my office visit. And that told me then that I needed to have fees that your average person could pay. In other words, if I keep my fees under $100, then I'm pretty much cool.
So you sold these books before you went to college. This was your way
No, during college, during the summers at Harvard.
Okay.
So I went to Harvard, and then my first summer, I sold books door to door. And then I went back to Harvard, and then the second summer, I sold books door to door.
And what kind of books were they?
Educational books, storybooks for children, aimed at basically families. And I would see how these people would whip out money. I mean, they had it. And so then when I went to medical school and they gave us a lecture about people not having money, I said, oh. And I sold books in a rich neighborhood, Scottsdale, Arizona, and in a very poor neighborhood, the ghettos of Dayton, Ohio. The people in the ghettos of Dayton, Ohio actually spent more money than the people in Scottsdale, Arizona, whatever the reason. And so I decided, I need to locate my medical practice in a middle class, lower middle class neighborhood where people are used to paying their bills. That's what I did.
Well, you were ingenious and you had common sense and you were creative and you applied yourself. And that's what lots of people don't do, I guess. It's too bad.
Yeah, they get indoctrinated. And again, if your reason for going into medicine is the social status, then you can easily circumvent the small problem that half of everything you're being taught is just false. Because what do? Well, you go to continuing medical education classes devised by the drug companies, by the hospitals, and by the insurance companies to keep up. And so you can get more inaccurate, unreliable information.
Now, you have a website, and you can also help people heal through that website and through consultation. But you've also written books. So I want you to tell us a little bit about the books. I believe there's more than one. And have you tried to communicate any of what you've just said on this show to other people in the profession, the MDs, so that they can wise up?
No, I don't. I mean, if they call me, I'll talk to them. But they're in a very heavily insulated situation. So all their continuing medical education is screened by the drug companies, by the hospitals, and by the insurance companies. So I would never qualify as legitimate continuing medical education information. And then doctors have to get so many units per year. And these same entities certify as to which types of information constitute continuing education for doctors. And so, of course, this education I just shared with you would not qualify as units of education. Right. So these doctors then have a disincentive to listen to or read anything that doesn't count as continuing medical education units because they're pressed for time and, as you can see, money. So I have a website, vitalitycapsules.com, and people can get my free report on how to actually, probably turpentine. People like that report better. So it's vitalitycapsules.com/candida, CANDIDA, vitalitycapsules.com/candida. And then at the same site, vitalitycapsules.com, people can click either office hours if they want to communicate with me in a group format, or they can click discovery session if they want to communicate with me one-on-one format.
Yeah, and you are, it's great that you're accessible. I've referred people to you. I hope that they
Thank you.
Yeah, because there are so many people who write to me from all over the world, and they have this or that going on, and, I'm not a practitioner of any kind. So I say, you've got to call Dr. Daniels, because this is the person who has seen through the shroud, the pretenses. And I'm very thrilled that you just gave us this incredible explanation, rapid fire as it was. But I feel bad for doctors. I really do.
Oh, they're in a bad situation. They're in a very bad situation. They have a suicide rate 5 times that of the general population. More than half of them are suffering from burnout. However, they have become toxic human beings, and they spread this toxicity to everyone they touch, including their patients.
It's truly awful. I mean, that's all I can say. I thought I understood some of this, but now I'm really bummed.
Yeah, and the doctors don't even know a way out. And why don't you know a way out? Because your whole family condemned you. Like when I lost my license, and then I was put on the first do not employ list, and the second do not employ list, and then the terrorist list. It was clear to me I need to leave the country. Like I need to start over. And so I did that. But as I left, my mother condemned me, my siblings condemned me. You're a failure, you're a washout, you're stupid. All of this. And then no financial support either, by the way. And then, you're running out on your responsibilities. What about your children? So, whoa, my children are 21, 19 and 17 or 16. And if the 16-year-old wants to come with me, she's welcome to come with me. So that was the best I could do. But any doctor who wants to change up, do the right thing, acknowledge any of the things that I've just told you is going to meet with total condemnation, say nothing of immediate economic ruin, and then total condemnation from his family and relatives. Because most people see a doctor in economic terms, the spouse, the kids, all the physical things a doctor can give them. Why? Because they never see him anyway. He's always working. So for him to come home one day and says, oh, you're going to have me and no money, they're like, well, we don't even know who you are. So it's very, very difficult. It takes a tremendous amount of courage, I think, to walk away. I personally had a pretty big push. But even then, I guess it took a little bit of courage. But it takes a lot of courage for a doctor to walk away, even though in his mind, he's got a paycheck, so to speak, or things are happening. But now, with the very high loans doctors are taking out, more and more of them are not ending up in a positive balance at the end of the month or the end of the year.
And I guess they just keep going because they figure eventually they'll hit that positive balance, right?
Some do, but now they're a little brighter than that. I mean, when you get behind each month, you realize you're not ever going to reach it, but then you don't know what else to do. And you don't know how to just walk away. And a lot of doctors, they're not sophisticated about loans and this and that. And the other thing too is if their loan is tied to the government, then defaulting on that loan means they could lose their driver's license. Every license you can lose. You can lose your driver's license, your passport. The list is endless as to what you can lose by not paying off this debt.
Oh, wow. Well, somebody's going to have to wake up. It's either them or it's us or...
Well, the only place to wake up really is at the patient level. There is no other point in this system that it can be seriously impacted. The only place to impact it is at the level of the patient. And the patient has to simply decide, just look at the odds I already showed you. Your odds of healing with this system are just about zero. Your odds of healing with the placebo effect is 33%. So you do the calculation.
Well, there it is. If that's the range, 0 to 33 with the placebo effect, that's pretty striking.
No, the placebo effect is 33%. It's not 0. It's 33%.
But I mean, from 0 to 33.
0 is medical stuff, and 33% is placebo. So you figure that out. What do you want to do?
Yeah, that's what I meant. If placebos give you 33, that's a big present right there.
And that's doing nothing. And that's why I was so shocked when so few people elected to do nothing. People don't understand the placebo effect and what that means. When they say the placebo effect, they think, that means I'm a hypochondriac. No, that's not what that means. That means if you do nothing, your body will heal itself. That's the placebo effect. Your body's going to heal itself 33% of the time, just with you leaving it alone and letting it do the best it can.
Well, I really appreciate this discussion, and I want our listeners to go to vitalitycapsules.com, explore that site. I would download the Candida PDF just to get an experience of what Dr. Daniels talked about in the previous show that we did. This is, again, quite an amazing journey to go on. As a human being, to realize what's happening in your body, what's happening in your environment, around the people who are placed there to help you heal. And it's nothing like what we thought.
That's true.
Yeah. So anyway, well, thank you so much, Dr. Daniels. I really hope people will take advantage of your availability and consult you for their needs and enjoy what you have to give them, which is, it's bigger than truth. It really is. It's bigger than truth. That's what I have to say about it.
Well, thank you very, very much. It's been a pleasure, sharing this message, and I hope that it saves a few lives.
A few lives added to a great deal of sanity. I mean, that's what people need. They need to learn how to become sane about something that is insane, that is foisted at them all the time. So you've done it. You've given that present as well. So I hope to do more shows with you, because each time I do them, I know I'm going to get great feedback about this show. People are going to be very happy with it. And thank you. So we'll see you again.
Okay, you're welcome. All right, bye-bye.
Hi, this is Sophia, encouraging you to visit my online store, avatarproducts.com, where you will find a wonderful thing called magnesium cream. Magnesium is a mineral we desperately need due to the fact that it alkalinizes our blood, and, another bonus, it relaxes muscles. So all you athletes or computer addicts with workout soreness or stiff necks, use a little magnesium cream on a regular basis and feel the kinks getting looser. Magnesium is the dominant ion in the cell and facilitates hundreds of biochemical exchanges. Using it transdermally through the skin means you can put it right on those chronic pain spots, and it still gets absorbed to work systemically. A 3-ounce tube is easy to carry around and a great gift for aging parents, introducing them to natural chemistry for rapid pain relief for arthritis and joints, and great overall cellular support. It's at avatarproducts.com in the Sun and Skin section.